Thanks for coming back promptly from lunch. If I could invite our colleagues who are out in the hall to come on in and find a seat. We try to stay on schedule here, so I appreciate your assistance with that. Hopefully everyone enjoyed a wonderful lunch. How about Osdell? Are they the most fantastic and generous hosts? Let's hear it for Osdell. I think they're doing a fantastic job. I don't know if George is here, but I see Adonis, I think. They really are doing a wonderful job. We have a few more friends coming on in. So as people come in and get settled, and I think we have quite a few more friends that are coming up from lunch, I would like to start to introduce our next speaker, who actually we have quite a bit I have quite a bit to tell you about our next speaker, James Gray. So James has over 25 years of experience in the digital content and education sector. He founded Coots Library Services in 1992, and he was CEO. He grew this business to become one of the world's leading suppliers to academic and government libraries, supplying libraries in over 120 countries, including Holland, the UK, South Africa, Canada, and the United States. There was a digital platform that he developed here, and My iLibrary, which was adopted by major universities from China, Europe, throughout Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, which helped these libraries and major universities transition their content acquisition from print to digital. This service was created in 1992 and sold in 2006 to Ingram Industries. And if you're not familiar with Ingram, they are really one of the largest private companies, I think, on earth, actually. They're a multi-billion-dollar U.S. industrial group. They do everything from tugboats to book production. Believe me, you should look them up. They're pretty interesting. And they are the world's largest wholesaler of books. After that sale, James moved to the United States, and where he's probably pretty glad not to be living right now. And he became CEO and president of Ingram Digital, which was a pioneer company in the ebook industry. And with this company, he set up and helped to run Amazon's ebook services prior to the launch of Kindle. In 2012, James returned to the United Kingdom and set up Cortext, which is the company he is leading today, to switch the focus from publisher and reseller solutions to helping learners, helping students, helping professionals, helping those who are learning to achieve more. And now, in just a few short years, Cortext has become the UK's leading digital textbook and learning platform and is the fastest growing of these platforms internationally. Cortext supplies over 100 United Kingdom universities with digital content learning solutions, connecting students with faculty, connecting students with each other, and with the content required for their course. It's a very simple objective: to help every student achieve more as the learning environment transitions to a fully online one. I couldn't think of a more appropriate speaker to start off our second track of the day, which is on the academic environment and education technology. So please join me in welcoming James Gray.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you very much for having me here. I'm delighted to attend here in Athens and speak to you today. I'm going to cover a lot of ground, so I'll move through it. But I think some of the conversations that we heard this morning, some of the talks we heard this morning, sort of a precursor to the application of some of those concepts in the realm of education technology. So Tracy's actually done an introduction, so I won't dwell on this, but I'm based down in Bournemouth, and we call that Silicon Beach. London has a Silicon Roundabout, but we actually have a Silicon Beach, a real one. So we're quite proud of that. In terms of that history, I think what's really interesting is the part for me, I've become quite surprised at how quickly the acceleration in terms of online learning and the acceleration of the adoption of digital content and the utilization of it in sort of traditional classrooms. And we're seeing that across the world. We're now being used in 40, 50 different countries. And we're bringing partnerships to bear, as well as the technology that we develop, partnerships to bear that really support that shift in that transition to online and digital learning. So from 1,000 different publishers, we formed a partnership with the CLA around the ability to enable to automate the creation of course packs from licensed content and facilitate the easy access to that. We've been in discussions with Adam at the CA in Australia around things that we can do there to help in terms of the Australian education market. We partnered with big publishers on a range of different initiatives, from data analytics through to reading and content solutions. Very importantly, we have a global partnership with Microsoft as well, and this has had a big impact in the area of data analytics and artificial intelligence that I'll run into. And then also with device manufacturers, both HP and Samsung in particular, where the ubiquity of access to content actually has to happen on a device. And those devices have to be able to be deployed internationally and easily managed. And effectively, that alignment of those things is really some of the components that are driving this acceleration. So what we do, we really concentrate on three particular things: discovery of content, the learning and the utilization of that content, and then analysis and improvement from the use of that content. So effectively, a student through a university, through a school, apart from just the textbooks that we enable access to, there's also all the content that's in the library. There's also content that might be secondary rights content that comes from the likes of the CMOs. There's a whole raft of other content that is used in learning. And we are attempting to enable easy discovery of that content and alignment of that content with course. So from discovery, you can then actually curate those content references and actually align them with the specific course that's being taught, and then enable access to the student. Once the student has access to that, they can then start to utilize these various learning tools to get the best from the content. So I'm a student, I now have, in essence, think of an Amazon Kindle, and all the way through, what do I want to do? Well, I want to connect, I want to collaborate, I want to create references and citations. I may want to do translation. I want to have access to writing tools so I can write my dissertations, my papers. All of those components then come to bear in maximizing the benefit the students get from having that content online. Across all of that is then a whole layer of data collection. And it's really this point, when you start looking at the impact of education technology, it's really all about the data. And we heard very much this morning that data component and how that shifts from actually, once you have the data, how do you actually then utilize that to help drive outcomes? So simple things, automated content suggestions, the ability for academics to see analytics around student engagement on the course, the ability to analyze content and the value of content being used. All of those things then come to bear in that analytics layer. So we deal with, it says 50, it's actually over 100 universities now, a lot in the UK, increasingly overseas as well. And I think what's really important is that we are now seeing universities not just supply content through the library, but supply actual learning content. So digital textbooks from key publishers like Pearson and Wiley and Cengage. as well as then utilize their own resources, OER content, anything and everything that supports a particular course. And that really comes back to that whole point of partnerships, where we drive these partnerships to help facilitate access to that and actually try to create not a one-stop shop, but an easy mechanism to be able to navigate through different content silos, different partners, to be able to use the content for that particular course or subject. So I mentioned the partnership we have with the CLA. There's a very important point to that, and it's very relevant to here, is that within this secondary rights arena, the creation of course packs is something that a lot of people aren't even aware of in the education field in terms of the sheer volume of activity that's occurring. With the CLA, we built and launched this digital content store that facilitates the automatic creation of these course packs, so a chapter from a book, a journal article, coming together to support a course, and the uptake has just been phenomenal. And I think it's something that actually is a service, as well as then enabling the simple access to that content. The service component is making it far more efficient for universities to be able to discover and use this content specifically aligned to a course. In addition, we're working with the CLA on the development of a reading list curation system called KeyLinks. And again, another component of the technology that supports that learning. So the individual academic can discover the content and actually then curate it, regardless of what it is. It may be references to a website, it may be a YouTube video, doesn't matter. All of that can be available directly for the student through that list, specifically aligned with that course. So, current education. It is a single one-size-fits-all approach that has sort of predominated for the last X number of years. And it simply doesn't fit who people are. We're all individuals. We all accumulate knowledge in different ways. We all learn in different ways. And the reality is that technology can now support a transition from this one-size-fits-all, where everyone is measured in the same way, regardless of who they are as individuals. And I think that's where it starts to become really interesting. But you can see this one-size-fits-all just doesn't work, in that these numbers come from the US, where across some school administration, school districts, measuring the percentage of students in love with their learning and in love with their school as they go through the grades. And you can see that progressively falls off. Well, most people in this room are probably lifelong learners and enjoy the love of learning and enjoy just broadening our own horizons. And somehow we have to take that back into schools, and we have to apply that in a way that engages children around who they are as individuals and how they learn. And that is what technology can support. And it's really important because the workplace of today has evolved and is evolving, and it's moving at an ever faster pace, but the classrooms just haven't kept up. And the context around what are they teaching and how are they teaching it and how is that aligned to the world of work tomorrow is really something that people are now beginning to really focus on addressing. And it's a huge impact around jobs and around the future in terms of employment and society as a whole. So those changes in demand are really showing in terms of the requirements from employers looking to have schools put out students who have better skills in complex communication, expert thinking, and a reduction in teaching around aspects of manual routine. And that really shows up here in looking at these 6 specific areas. So problem-solving innovation, global awareness, knowledge construction, skilled communication, self-regulation and assessment, and obviously collaboration. These are skills that are that are required today. So this learning shift is now happening. And it is going to get faster. And I think from this morning, the talk that the good professor gave around artificial intelligence is probably going to be one of, if not the key driver. This shift is supported by some pretty major macro transformational trends. Big data being one of them, ubiquity of internet access and devices. And those things enable the application of artificial intelligence when looking at content and looking at how students interact and use that content and work together and learn. So this shift starts to power a whole range of different actions around teaching and learning. So moving from teacher-led classrooms to project-based learning, from traditional classrooms to flipped classrooms, where actually the student is almost doing the sort of the studying component at home online, whilst actually in the class they're doing the problem solving and almost the homework element there in the class, collaborating with each other. Independent learning instead of moving to collaborative learning. And then obviously individualized to personalized. And for me, this is one of the most important and most interesting areas in terms of how do you personalize that experience. So, what does this new paradigm look like? Well, it applies to everyone here because the first thing that people should be thinking about is how do we enable the content to know who it's actually being looked at and used by. And that is the foundation cornerstone of the ability to personalize the experience. So, we want to be driving efficiency and performance through the utilization of that content, really focus on what are the learning outcomes and student success. And then 3, that content needs to be immersive and personalized. And off the back of that, we can then really drive this improved arena of personalization of content and learning and actually driving separate learning pathways for each student. The foundation stone of this, though, is artificial intelligence. I mean, this is the be-all and end-all in being able to personalize that experience. And you obviously heard this morning about artificial intelligence. I've lumped the 3 components that the good professor talked about here. The overall umbrella of artificial intelligence, which basically programs that can understand and reason. Machine learning, where the algorithms actually use the data to get more efficient and better at what they are tasked to do. And then the deep learning component, linking those neural networks together to really do things at scale. I think people do not appreciate just how important artificial intelligence is going to be in the future. I mean, I'm talking about education, but it's going to impact everything. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, I think has this wonderful point where he's basically saying it could be one of the world's most fundamental pieces of technology the human race has ever created. Now, I mean, I think he's somebody in the know, and he's got a perspective there which I think is fascinating and something that should give everyone pause for thought in terms of the future across all aspects of society. So how does this work for content? Well, effectively, you have the traditional book moving through and being able to be understood down at the learning object level. So you take a piece of content, what are the components in that content that support a very specific learning outcome? You're then aligning that with tools and machine learning to be able to drive comprehension and understanding around that specific learning object. Now, this is a far more complex chart, but I'm going to focus on 3 things. Coming off of all of the interaction of students with each other, with their teachers, with the content, you drive a massive data set. And off that data set, you can really do 3 things. On the right-hand side, drive descriptive analytics, what has happened, predictive, from what's happened, we are making a prediction that this is going to happen in the future, through to prescriptive. If I want to change that future, what do I now need to do? So if I haven't understood something and I'm building on blocks of knowledge, I need to go back and restudy it. I may need to look at it in a different way. So the system has to understand my level of comprehension and understand my progression through that content. But from that, you can then create a personalized learning environment that's applicable to any student across any and all content. And that's a real key component of what we're trying to work towards, which when you're dealing with over 1,000 publishers, it's like herding cats, which I'm sure you know yourselves. And this is really important. I'm going to give you one example here. Lots of developing nations are striving to move to becoming knowledge economies. And I think that graph on the right there really shows it. Really moving up the scale in terms of utilization of minds in the application of work and trying to find employment and improve society. In 1979, IBM employed 0 people in India. By the late 80s, there was over 100, mid-90s, there was over 100,000 people that IBM employed in India. India created an education environment that put out quality candidates who actually were able to contribute to work on a global basis, and the employment and the work came to find the people. The people didn't have to go to the work. And that is something that nations are striving for. And it's seen in Egypt. We're working on a very big project in the country of Egypt. The application of our system across the entire higher education space. But Egypt's licensing content on a national level, buying licenses to content with access to all 90+ million Egyptian citizens, and then applying technology to enable people to get the best from that content. And I think this is a model that other nations are absolutely going to follow. So, the data. From all of that utilization, and again, just think an Amazon Kindle and everybody using it and being able to sort of share. And then off of that, we're able to collect data. And that data starts to show you student activity, activity on individual bits of content, all the way through across to the courses. Here, you can click on a particular book, say corporate finance, heat map every single page of that book and show the activity by student, by course, by university, by country on that content. Right the way down to times of the day it's accessed, days of the week it's accessed. You can then start to look at search terms used across the content, the pathways that people are taking, the connections they make out, how they collaborate with each other. You can then start to build a data set against each individual user that basically ends up supporting them in terms of how do they rank in relation to their peers on that particular course, and enable that personalization that everybody is striving towards. So here you can then start to track them through their course and actually get comparators of individual students right at that point of learning. More content around, a deeper dive in terms of how content is utilized. And then actually start to predict trends. So you can actually start to see on a global basis trends across different subjects. How does learning in one country compare to another? How does learning on one economics course from Hong Kong compare to Stanford University? You can start to begin to understand how that data can be applied from the perspective of content utilization and from a teaching and learning perspective. So, some other examples of artificial intelligence being used. So, the intelligence is driven by the data. Now, there's one here which is a little bit off the wall, but I found it fascinating. In some of the stuff that we've been doing in the Middle East, we got linked up with the Alan Turing Institute, and they've been doing some fascinating stuff, writing algorithms that enable the transcription of old manuscript, handwritten Arabic. And they actually, you can start to see the algorithms being formed and then the letter recognition, the character recognition. And they actually set up a competition which Google entered, Amazon entered, Microsoft entered, and the Alan Turing Institute actually won it off of this old handwritten manuscripts. They got an 85 or an 80% plus accuracy rate, which I think is now up to about 87%. So the utilization there of artificial intelligence and machine learning in terms of looking across thousands of pages of old manuscript and then trying to understand it. Now, another example, on any piece of content, you can now highlight that content, and at the touch of a button, it will actually open out and highlight for you, okay, what are the verbs being used in that content? What are the nouns? What are the adjectives? And you can do this across anything. So you highlight it, and that highlighted text gets strung against some artificial intelligence algorithms that basically break down that text and understand those components of it. You can start to imagine how useful that could be for school kids. Accessibility is going to be a huge component of one of the benefits that AI will bring in terms of in the learning space. Now, here's another great one. I love this. This is something we're working on. So we understand who the student is, what the level of the course is, how far they are into the course, and how the book and the content aligns with that course. If they then highlight some text, start to auto-generate assessment questions based on that text and based on the level that that student is studying at. So again, from the content that's out there, the ability to overlay an intelligence on top of it and drive a new use case. That's something that we're hoping we can be able to do at scale across any piece of content. You run it through the AI engine, and it will extract and form a range of different questions specific to that content. And then the context is the layer and the course, the level and the course. Here's another one. Highlight, and this happens in real time, highlight text, and you can click up to 60 different languages and literally translate the text on the fly. So you can import any piece of content and straight out the gate, highlight and translate it. So students where English isn't, in this case, English isn't their first language, an ability to translate something straight away. Now, because it's a specific learning environment, then working on the algorithms that try to put the translation into context. So it's a science course at this level. What does that mean for that translation? And finally, off of that, you can then move into different realms. So content can start to come alive and move into the realms of mixed reality, augmented reality. So instead of a picture in a book, why can't we actually have the brain in front of us or the skeleton in front of us and start to build on that over time? This is absolutely the future of content. There is no question about it. You know, the ability to put on augmented reality glasses and see content in this fashion just changes how you see everything. It is quite fascinating. If any of you get a chance to do it, you have to go and see some of this for real. Okay, I think this is important in that it basically looks at a whole range of areas around secondary rights, questions that have already been asked here, and I think gives you the opportunity to sort of think about the application of these technologies in relation to your own areas of business.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. I would love to invite, just to keep the program moving, invite our next panel to come to the stage. And Sarah is moderating that panel. And while we do, I wanted to see if we had any questions for James. Actually, James, if you just want to hang around up here. Do we have any questions in the group for James on the education technology? I know I had one, which was on the types of analytics, descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive that you were highlighting there. Where do you think we are in that continuum, James? Do you think we're all the way up to prescriptive at this point, or are we still building to get to prescriptive?
I think there are examples of prescriptive analytics being used currently, but they are on very limited content sets. So it's prescriptive around, say, a specific publisher. But we're still building the data, because ultimately to drive accurate prediction, you've really got to have a big data set and really understand the context of how you're looking at that data. But we are well on the way to it, And
I was also going to say, if you are working today at a CMO and you want to know more about how how the partnership with Cortex is working. I would suggest to talk to Matt Flager. I'm calling you out, Matt, but I think you would agree. There he is, waving. So if you really want to know more, I think the digital content store, did I get the name correct? Yes, that the underpinnings of that are the partnership between CLA and Cortex, and I think it's been fantastic. It's really transformational for students and their access to content in the UK. And Matt has spoken with us about that in the past, and I would welcome you to find Matt at the break, or James, who's going to be with us for the rest of the day today, right? For any questions. Thank you so much, James. And thank you. Thank you. And now we're moving to this fantastic panel. And I think, Sarah, are you going to introduce your panelists?
I am indeed.
Wonderful. Then let me introduce you. How is that? Sarah is graciously moderating this panel today, which will be talking about a variety of different aspects of education and the academic environment. And you may know Sarah as the Chief Executive of the Publishers, licensing services in the United Kingdom. She was appointed chief executive there in 2010. In her early career, Sarah was a partner for 10 years at city law firm Taylor Joynson Garrett, now Taylor Wessing, specializing in copyright. She has a lot of experience in the music industry, where she worked for over 13 years as chief executive of the Music Publishers Association, and then at CSAC and other organizations as well. So she's represented her constituents throughout her career in both Brussels and Westminster, and has served on several industry boards, and she writes and speaks extensively on copyright. So we are thrilled to have her moderating the panel, well known to many of us, and I leave it to you, Sarah.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Tracy, for that rather lengthy introduction. So James's questions at the end provided a very nice segue into this panel, because you're going to be hearing really actually what is going on the ground in secondary licensing. And you're going to be hearing some very different perspectives, but I think there's going to be a common thread that comes out, which we might explore if we have some time for questions. So I'm going to introduce each of the panelists just before they speak, because you won't remember everything otherwise. And we're going to actually start with Frédérique Couet, who is on my far right. And as many of you should know, she is chief executive of Copybec in Quebec in French Canada. And she has legal qualifications and degrees that put everyone else to shame, I would imagine. Many degrees in law. And she joined Copybec as legal advisor back in 2004. So she's been with them for a very long time before becoming CEO in 2016. So Frédérique is going to talk to us about a couple of very interesting developments in Copybec. Over to you.
Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about two services we have in Copybec. The first one is Samuel, and some of you have already heard about Samuel and what we offer. And the other one is called Donna. And it's been something we have been doing for a long time, but we are doing more in a more formalized way now. So Samuel is a platform for teachers from K-12 to colleges, cégeps in Quebec, which are in between the end of K-12 and universities. And what we offer on that platform is content that they can download. They can search, select, and download excerpt under their license. So it was very important for us to provide this platform where they could get the content without extra cost. And the purpose of Samuel was to sustain the license, because in 2012, as you all know, in Canada, we had this modification of the law, and with a lot of new exceptions that give universities, K-12, all the education system possibility for new use without paying, and they interpreted very largely. So we wanted to give more for us to be able to continue to sell the license, but the license by itself wasn't enough anymore. So we had to add something to the license. So we thought about that platform of content. when we decided to develop Samuel, we decided to develop it as not as on all by itself. So we chose to develop Samuel with a partnership with a company called Demark, within Quebec, but I think in many countries, where they offer a platform for publishers and for bookstore and libraries to be able to use digital content. So it was for us a good choice because it was less expensive to develop, it was faster also, and also it was an environment that many people knew already in the education system. And the publisher were already in that platform, so it was easier to get access to the content without asking publisher to integrate the content to a new platform. So it was a very a good move for us. So since we launched Copyback in 2014, in August 2014, it's 4 years now, the popularity of Samuel has been growing steadily. So for this year, it's more than 1.5 million of pages have been reproduced using Samuel. And over the 4 years, it's the total of more than 3 million pages. And the good thing with Samuel is that every time someone, a teacher, go on Samuel, select an excerpt, he has to go through a process of a declaration. So we get all the information about what has been reproduced in how many pages, for how many students. So in terms of redistribution, it's fairly easy for the teachers as well as for Copyback to get the information. Over the 4 years, one thing we did was to survey what was the teachers and professors thinking about Samuel and what was their needs. And it's really something that you have to do. I don't know if I don't have the slides. No, what's it? Yeah, that should be, but that's fine. We can do it without the slides. It would have been better, but.
I don't think we have them loaded.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fine.
Sorry, that was a miscommunication.
Okay, that's
sorry
okay.
about that.
And so first we had a look and feel for Samuel, and that look and feel moved, and we added some different amelioration to the Samuel. So the thing we did through our contact with users was to have a new searchable catalog. So now you can access, first Samuel was accessible only once you logged on. You would have to log on to be able to see the catalog and do research. Now you can access Samuel directly online, do your research, and if you select something, then you're going to have to log on to be able to take the books. Oh, yeah, so that was, maybe if I go back to the first one. So this was the landing page for Samuel in 2014. So it was quite fairly basic, just information about Samuel, and then you had to log on to see the catalog. But it wasn't satisfactory for the teachers. They found it cumbersome to have to log on every time. So in 25, we made just a quick change at that time. But then by 2018, so actually by 2017, so last year, after the last survey we did, we moved to this platform, which give its more actual look and feel, but also you can browse through the content, do the research, and we improve the research. And you will see there is, I don't know what's called in English, filtarian. It's like you can see all the information about the search you have been doing, and you can go back and select. And one thing we also did, because what the teacher was saying is there is more and more document on Samuel, and it's difficult for us to select sometimes and see, and we want to have more information on what is on Samuel. So we decided to have selections with themes. So I don't have the pages, but when you go down on the website, you have different themes that we select and we renew every time. According to age, class level, and everything. So, and subject, to help them to see what's on Samuel and to help them choose what they want to use. So I'm just going to move on DONA because I only have 2 minutes left. So DONA is a service for students with special needs. And it was a response to a question we had from one textbook publisher as well as from the schools. And first, it was a very low type of service. We would just receive the request from the schools. We will deal with the request, but the publisher will send the digital version of the document for the students. So we had a lot of contacts with publishers, with special needs, school boards, schools, professors and teachers, and we had the information that there is a need for a one-stop shop in Quebec for everyone to be able to get that content, because it's difficult for teachers to locate and obtain the content. Very often it's very long and they want to have something faster. So we moved to something different last year, where we will we are now hosting the content of one publisher. Last year was one textbook publisher. This year it's 2 textbook publishers. And it did allow us to shorten the frame time for the professor to obtain the digital version, the adapted digital version for those students with special needs. In the case of Samuel and in the case of Donna, in both cases, we are still continuing to improve the system. Samuel will go new improvement with it being integrated in a larger platform with libraries in schools. And for Donna, we are collecting still information because we want to build a platform to enable teachers to obtain much faster those contents for their students.
Thank you very much indeed, Frédéric. We'll go through all the panelists, and Tracy, can I just check what time you're expecting us to finish?
I am giving you...
Because we started a bit late.
I know, and I accounted for that. So at 3:05, 3:08, I was going to give you a 10-minute warning then.
Okay, fine. Thanks very much.
Thanks for asking.
So I'd like to introduce Piero Attanasio, who is going to the podium to speak. I hope his slides are there.
They are.
Good.
They are.
And Piero's background is in economics, having studied at the University of Bologna, and he's been a book publisher since 1986. He's very active in the Italian Publishers Association, AIE, and in that mantle has driven through all sorts of interests, ranging from the Copyright Directive to the IFRRO project, which may be familiar to many of the RROs. He's chaired the Standard and Technology Committee of the IPA.
Always.
He's written books, including a book about the impact of technologies on the book trade and rights management in the digital environment. So I'd like to turn over to Piero to tell us about something very different again.
Thank you very much. I will tell you a story of the relation between the Publisher Association and in particular the academic group of the Publisher Association in Italy and the academic environment in the country. It's not a story directly related to copyright management, but I hope that it's useful for benchmarking in how to communicate in this environment. We had an issue. The issue was that copyright is seen as an obstacle to the progress of science by many academics. In this environment, publishers are always seen as bad guys, so we didn't like this. And copyright is responsible for a very difficult the academics, the researchers in particular meet in their life, in particular when there are budgetary issues. And the second issue we had is that in Italy in the past years, all the focus of the debate was on research and very little on the didactic mission of the universities. And this is on the opposite. The Italian publishers make more money with the higher educational books rather than with the scholarly publications. all in all, the problem we had is that our association was not seen as an interlocutor by the academic institutions. So which kind of strategy we developed? The idea was to pass a very simple but important message, that publisher care of the health of the educational system in the country, and on the evolution, on the quality, on the effectiveness of the higher education in Italy. And their role is serving these communities and to accompany the evolution of this and contribute to the evolution and the modernity of this of the higher education. This was the very simple message. How we decide to pursue this is just to stop speaking about copyright and books, because we realized that it's impossible to argue with people that is not prepared to listen to you. So we start speaking about different things. We start funding research about universities in the country and offering occasions for debate, inviting the academics, and we remain very much silent very often. So the first initiative was a survey. We interviewed around 2,000 students twice in 2 second years, in 2014 and 15. And we did this survey to understand how they study today and how they would like to study. There was here still some reference to books, of course, or in general to educational content, but was not just educational content, was in general, which are the style, the habits, and their opinion about how to improve or how to learn. And what we did is then to present, we did this survey together with one Italian university. We presented the result in another Italian university. The first was in Milan, the second in Rome. And we published an e-book about this survey that had some echo in the academic environment. Even more, the second survey we funded, there was in collaboration with one of the most prestigious foundation in Italy, the Agnelli Foundation, and together with the University of Milan. What we did is a qualitative survey interviewing 100 Italian professors all along the country. You know that Italy is very different when you go south or north, and on different aspects of their work. And again, I will not go into the details of these surveys, but just to tell you the strategy. This has very little to do with the books. They were one of the 5 areas were also about what kind of material you assign when speaking with the publishers with the teachers, sorry, to students. But it was just one of the 5 domains of the questions, and the survey was about the whole spectrum of the pedagogical issues in the higher education in Italy. The first presentation was very interesting because we presented to the chair of the cultural committee in Italy that was enthusiastic of the result, and she invited us to present in the parliament for the first time this survey. We invited all the academics, and we had a huge participation, very high-level participation, with several rectors of the Italian universities, many vice-rectors, head of departments, a lot of very important people, opinion leaders in the sector. And then after that, the main author of this research, that is a professor at the University of Milan, has been invited to present again this survey in many times in several universities. And the third case was completely different. It was just an event that we organized in the Italian Book Fair in Milan with the formula of the mock trial. We were very rigorous in setting up this mock trial with the equal opportunities for accusation and defense, the 2 lawyers, and we asked professors with a very high reputation to play with us, and they accepted. It was very nice because it was very important professors playing with us in this mock trial. And the very interesting thing was also that nobody knew in advance the result, because the jury was the audiences themselves that had to vote at the end with the green card or red card if guilty or not guilty. And 2 editions, the first time the university was guilty, the second was, no, the opposite. The first time was innocent, the second was guilty for 2 different crimes. Interesting also that we get the right argument. There was the broken social elevator. It was in just 1 year before the OECD published a book with the same title of our initiative completely by chance, but eventually we got the right argument. Result. After this strategy that, have you seen, is 5 years, after this strategy, the university institutions, the Confederation of the Italian Rectors, the Council of the Italian National Universities, etc., started to invite us on every occasion. They organize a conference about the future of the university. In particular, we have been invited with 3 different presentations about the launch of the plan for the Italian digital university. It was very relevant for us in terms at political level. So I have to say that this strategy, where for 4 years we never spoke about books or copyright, was very important now to speak about book or copyright with these people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Piero. Can I just be clear? You've worked very hard on establishing a very good relationship now with universities. They invite you to speak, but you're not actually licensing them at all, and there's no money being paid yet. So they may not be so pleased when they have to actually pay. We wish you well on that journey. Next up, last but not least, is our host for today, Adonis Karachas. Sorry for the pronunciation, who is actually the chairman of OSDEL and currently into his 2nd term as chair. And he is a lawyer by background and profession, and was working with publishers, and particularly with Nomiki Biblioteki, until he became CEO of the publisher, Nomiki Biblioteki. So he is a full-blown publisher and devoting a lot of time to collective licensing and enjoying it. And over to you.
Thank you. Well, Kalispera, everybody. This is good evening, everybody. It's good to have you here in Athens. I will start by giving you an overview of a small RRO in a small country like Greece, OSDEL. Well, some numbers. Sorry. Yes. In Greece, the educational book publishing is around 100. We have around 120 active educational publishers, and they publish over 900 titles yearly, which accounts for 10% of the annual book production. There is still on board a unique model of state funding for university books. I underline that because you may not understand what does that mean, because we are still, thank God, the only country in the world that supports that system. That means that the state is buying all university books and is giving the university books to the students for free, and they They pay the publishers a fraction, actually, of the price, but this is a steady price, and this guarantees a steady market every year for educational publishing. That guarantees high quality publications in terms of educational publishing. It limits piracy, and we pray, of course, to last forever, but life is tough, and there is an uncertain sustainability of the model, of course, due to lack of funding in the future. The population of Greece is almost approximately 10 million people. The language limitations are there. Greek language is used by 13 million people worldwide. The market is very small. Obviously, it consists mainly of public universities. There is a wide dispersion of the industry. More than 100 publishers. The majority of them are very small and small entities.
It's quite awkward, isn't it?
Okay.
And I'm sorry for that.
Okay.
Solve this problem for you.
Okay, thank you. So, some main obstacles. First of all, lack of copyright awareness. The Greek financial crisis deepened the phenomenon, unfortunately. Whenever and wherever we go, the crisis is in front of us. Nobody pays because of the crisis. Public academic sector is already using content digitally without license and remuneration. Students should pay for everything except for books. That's a fact. And as publishers, we have to face it. In our case, as a legal publisher, things are worse. Libraries, public universities, everybody is asking to give the whole annual production and journals for free, while at the same time they pay 10,000 euros for a 1-year subscription at the LexisNexis database. They don't have anybody to beg at LexisNexis, but they have the Greek publisher, who is the one who is responsible for the social policy of the state. Well, we enjoy that relationship with librarians. Obviously, the things will go better, but so far the situation is what I described. Regarding OSDEL, there is limited human resources. The total personnel of OSDEL is 9 people. There is insufficient technical infrastructure and major obstacle due to state funding of educational content. Not all publishers are persuaded that licensing and obviously content delivery through an RRO is a one-way road. Some challenges, of course, the exploitation of new technology features and advantages, which has a positive outcome for both users and RROs. A constant effort to offer optimal services for straight, clear, and easy way to buy a license, and furthermore, content delivery. Right holders should gather around and support RRO's efforts, creating one-stop shop models for licensing and content delivery. Facing the challenges. Creating a positive attitude to right holders about content delivery. This is the next step on collective licensing, the way to enrich our product. Providing tools to ease licensing procedures and access to content. For example, we at OSDEL created Greek books repertoire, an academic licensing application through which users are able to identify whether a book can be used or not and facilitates reporting. This is an example of the Greek books repertoire. This is the front page. This is a search on the word math. And this is the result where the tutor, the instructors, the universities can look which of those books are licensed through OSDEL, and they can be purchased through the RRO. We also have created the ASPIDA platform for content delivery since 2008. Technically, the platform can cover content delivery with book preview and small summary of each book, but there is a step back. Publishers of academic books in Greece seem unwilling to deliver content because the uniqueness of state funding business model as I described it before. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Adonis. So that's quite an interesting spread of experiences, and interesting that Canada, where we talk about the Canadian flu, has an actual solution in place to make licensing easier, to add to the value of the licensing. In Italy, we hear that licensing hasn't yet started, but you still have a good relationship with universities, that's for sure. And Greece has its special challenges that we know about, and being a small country makes it even more challenging with the language limitation. But we've probably got a couple of minutes if there are any questions for our panelists. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question? Tracy. Not a question.
No, I was going to ask a question, and I'm also going to offer my microphone to anyone else who would like to ask a question. Thank you all three for your explanations. Piero, I was wondering, from your experience in the mock trial and the great examples that you gave us in terms of building relations, how can others here today learn from what you've done? What other lessons do you think we can take away? And also in markets where, in our own case, I think Rouhani said on the panel earlier, they were experimenting with prescient innovations because they're having, with all the litigation going on with universities, et cetera, we certainly have also that in the US. So what do you suggest, even in markets where we are licensing today? And I would welcome a comment actually from any of the panelists on this.
Difficult to answer. Any benchmark exercise is probably more up to the listener than to the speaker to understand what can be reused. I think it depends very much on the context. So I have not a single answer to this question. It in our case was for related to our lobbying activities, so it's nothing to do with licensing. So it's a really benchmark, double different context, national and for the objective. I think that the only thing I can suggest is that when you have people that have no intention to listen to you because of essentially for ideological reasons. That is one of the problems the copyright is affording. Switching a bit the dialogue is a possibility. So starting not speaking about what is of your direct interest, but speaking about the quality of the higher education in general, speaking about other things, and then gain reputation that then can let you introduce other topics. Of course, I hope that nobody has an interlocutor that don't want to listen to them, but I am afraid that sometimes probably happened in Canada years ago, and the result were very bad.
Yes, please.
So maybe I could add to the experience. In Quebec, we have been building relationship with our education customers. For the last about 10 years, we have been going to schools, meeting with teachers, being there at their conferences. It's been really good. We have built a very good relationship with the school board, the schools, the teachers, the Minister of Education, and now teachers call us to have information about copyright, and we always talk to them about copyright. That was the point of the meetings with them. So we always talk to them about copyright and the license. But now they call us instead of, also schools board, they have lawyers as employees also, but they don't call the employees, the lawyers from the school board. They call us because they think that we give them a better answer, So the contact and the relationship has been built with the K-12. We also did it with the CEGEPs, and now we are doing it with the universities. And of course, with the fact that now we have an agreement with the Laval University, it will be easier. But we started to do that before the agreement with Laval, and we want to meet them more regularly, like we do with CEGEPs, like we do with K-12, to understand their need, explain what we have, who we are, what we do, and just try to get out of just meeting once every 3 or 4 years just to renegotiate the license and to basically always talk about the same thing, which is they are going to come to us saying that they don't need a license, they already have licenses with publishers, and they don't want to pay twice, it's overlapping, and so on and so forth, and fair dealing, and so on. So we want to change that conversation to an exchange of information instead of just being negotiation. So that's something also we are doing. And Samuel and Donna, specifically Donna, is something that has come to a service for Copyback, coming from what we saw and those conversations we had with K-12 and CEGEPs.
Thank you, Frédéric.
Well, to me, the dialogue is the solution to our problem. Although there are many obstacles, lately the state is recognizing that both authors and publishers should be remunerated for their work, and this is a progress. It's been a long time. We haven't seen public authorities recognizing that, which is something very, very important. And by talk, I think we will approach where we want to go. Thank you.
And if I could just add a word about the UK, I think it's exactly the same experience you've had, because relations were at an all-time low after we had our big copyright tribunal case around 2001, 2002. And I know that CLA has worked extremely hard ever since to rebuild relations. They meet on a regular basis. They don't just meet for the renegotiation. There is an ongoing dialogue about all the issues that affect the universities that they're interested in. We come together with this group and the publishers once a year as well. They want to talk directly to the publishers. We've seen the development of, with James, of the digital content store, which is a culmination, which could only really have happened, after building these relationships. So dialogue is crucial, I would say. I think on that note, we've probably finished our time.
Very good. Do we have any other questions before we wrap it up? Any other questions? Okay, then could you please join me in thanking our panel here? Our next speaker is Sofia Karakeva, and following her talk, Sandra will come up and we'll have all three of them up here for a panel so you can all ask questions. Sophia has been active in the media industry for over 20 years and currently holds the position of Communications and Marketing Executive at Data Scouting, a leading software research and development company in Greece. She's also a news correspondent for Czech TV, and while in the past she worked as a journalist for the Czech news agency. She has over a decade of experience in providing expert consulting, analysis, and media monitoring in the area of media intelligence, with a doctorate in mass communication and journalism from the Charles University in Prague. She is also currently a FIBIP vice president and member of the FIBIP Copyright and Fair Trade Commission. And she has also served as the vice chair of the European chapter for AMEC, the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communications. So we are absolutely, I could go on, there's more. Sophia has a very impressive background as a conceptual media thinker, communication believer, and analyst enthusiast. We are absolutely honored and privileged to have her join us here today. Welcome, Sophia.
Kalispera, good afternoon. Thank you, Tracy, for the lovely introduction. So I will go straight directly, just saying a few words about Data Scouting, which is a software and research company focusing on providing innovative solutions to media monitors, libraries, museums, and archives. And we are a member of FIBIP since 2014. And FIBIP is the world's largest media intelligence association with over 130 corporate members in more than 60 countries in all continents. Founded in 1953 in Paris, FIBIP and its members focus on providing globally driven enterprise-scale solutions to media intelligence, PR distribution, media analysis, journalist database, as well as consulting and software as a service platforms. This is the first time that I'm attending an IFRRO conference, and I'm really excited to be here with you today and be given the opportunity to talk about the crucial issue of hate speech on social media. So let me start by giving you some facts about our social world. These facts come from Good Censor. This is a report by Google that was leaked to Breitbart News only the beginning of this month. So this is really very fresh facts. And according to the report, tech platforms now control the majority of online conversation. So we've gone with the utopian idea that the internet is a place for free speech and uncensored discussion. Tech platforms have taken a shift towards moderation and censorship. Tech users, government, and tech firms are all behaving badly in an environment where there are no clear rules and where speech is uncountable and without consequences. Free speech has become a weapon, or a political, social, and economic weapon, and racists, misogynists, and oppressors are allowed a voice. So what is hate speech? Let me start by saying that trying to find a universally shared definition of hate speech seems unlikely, mostly because any such effort clashes with political, legal, philosophical, ethical, and cultural debates over the boundaries of freedom of expression. And free speech is key to a thriving society, we can all agree on that, but does it cover hate speech? In Europe, many countries encourage freedom of expression, but they do have laws against hate speech, while in the United States, hate speech is constitutionally protected. Now, as far as social networks are concerned, these are private companies that have advanced their own definitions that bind users to a certain set of rules. In May 2016, the European Commission signed with Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Microsoft the Code of Conduct in an effort to counter the spread of illegal hate speech online. And although these are non-binding measures, IT companies have agreed to remove hateful content within 24 hours from reporting. And they are performing well, but they are still not there. YouTube has stated that its system makes mistakes and it will never be 100% perfect. Twitter has admitted that the platform is not good enough at removing hate speech, and Facebook hopes that artificial intelligence will help them solve the problem within the next 5 to 10 years. But at least they are collaborating at keeping bad actors off their platforms by sharing tips. But they are not always consistent in doing so. So, for example, in those 5 tweets, Jack Dorsey tried to explain why Twitter did not ban Alex Jones when other social networks had already done so. And Alex Jones has an audience of 6 million people in the United States, and he has used his social accounts to glorify violence, to attack, harass, and intimidate people based on the gender or faith. This takes us, of course, to the question how much liable social networks are for the content that is being published on their platforms. And according to the US law, tech firms are not required to censor content. Brussels too does not consider IT companies legally liable for material that is being posted on their sites. But then we have Germany's tough approach, where according to a new law, a platform can now be fined with up to 50 million euros if it fails to act on a flag content within 24 hours. But even within Germany, there are disagreements. Since the new law came into effect, Facebook has faced several different court decisions according to which the company is not allowed to delete statements that are protected by the right to free speech, no matter the company's community standards. So the German law in particular has raised serious concern that the deadline to remove content, coupled with a high fine, could lead to overregulating speech or to the removal of the wrong type of content. And let me share with you some statistics. Social networks are the most common daily online activity on both sides of the Atlantic. Eurobarometer and Pew Survey agree on that. It is 44% of the population in Europe and 68% in the US. In the EU, Malta has the highest online hate speech recorded, followed by the Czech Republic, while Lithuania, Estonia, and Italy were on the other side. In total, 9 out of 28 countries said that hate speech was the most common illegal form of content that they encounter online. Facebook also received last year 1,400 notifications of hate speech, which was almost double to that compared to Twitter and YouTube. And overall, last year, IT companies removed 70% of the content that was notified to them, which was actually pretty good, and it was 28% more than the year before. Ethnic origin, anti-Muslim hatred, and xenophobia were the most common grounds of hate speech recorded in the EU last year. Gender matters to social media, and according to the Amnesty International, which is a human rights group, Twitter is a toxic place for women. Toxic content included death and rape threats, transphobic, homophobic, and homophobic abuse. Twitter also was inconsistent when responding to reports and most of the time failed to remove abusive content. A UK journalist actually said that from the 100 tweets she reported, Twitter removed only 2. Now, developing markets are the new market for social networks. Mobile applications like Facebook Freebases, Twitter Lead, or YouTube Go have been specifically designed for markets like Ghana, Mexico, Philippines, or Pakistan. But they are failing in those markets because there is no regulation and they face problems with language diversity. But mostly they have been accused of inflaming pre-existing tension. And the most explicit example of that is Myanmar, where according to the United Nations Human Rights Council, Facebook, and let me quote, has been a useful instrument for those seeking to spread hate in a context where for most users, Facebook is the internet. So Facebook was accused of spreading fake news and misinformation and was blamed for hate-related speech against the ethnic minority of Rohingya. So how are tech companies mismanaging hate speech? Twitter and Facebook claim that hate speech is not allowed on their platforms, but then hate speech generates the most engagement, which means more revenues, which is, of course, a valid metric for both companies. Twitter and Facebook claim that they take strong measures to take down instances of hate speech, but they do not look up the same way at everyone. For example, Black children became a protected group under Facebook only last year. And in that corner, you can see a quiz that was given to Facebook content reviewers and was leaked by Republica, which is an investigative journalism site, and shows the unequal way that Facebook content reviewers were judging about abusive content or speech directed against different social, ethnic, and religious groups. I've already shared with you the example of Alex Jones, and additionally, Facebook and Twitter have been accused of tolerating bad behavior on the platforms, especially when coming from high-profile users like the US President Donald Trump. For example, a tweet saying that Democrats want to let illegal immigrants into the country so that they can pour into and infest the US would not be removed by Twitter, arguing that this is a newsworthy tweet that adds to a political discourse. Hate speech is indeed a very difficult problem because it is still very reactive with high error rate, and that is why artificial tools and automations are expected to improve removal and detection. For me, the most important part is this one, where we now face the risk of hate speech becoming the new normal, where we as a society start tolerating hate speech or faceless attacks without empathy. And how do we prevent that from happening? With more regulation, more media ethics, more education, and more awareness campaigns. And thank God we have initiatives like those one including the online project that I believe Johanna has been also involved and interviewed, so she can elaborate on that. So how is hate speech tracked and reviewed? Twitter has 330 million monthly active users. Facebook has 2.2 billion. And they produce billions of posts every day. A Wall Street Journal report from December last year indicated that Facebook content reviewers may view up to 8,000 posts a day. So the scale is so enormous that they actually outsource the initial work of flagging harassments, threat, abuse, and hate speech to users. Facebook currently has more than 7,500 content reviewers, which is 40% more than last year. Now, earlier this year, Facebook released 25 pages of detailed guidance that it gives to its content reviewers in order for them to decide what will stay on the platform and what will be taken down. So they're given a global set of policies in order to achieve consistency in all the markets that Facebook operates. They are given yes or no or multiple choice questions. So for example, if you would have to decide on a post regarding migrants, you would have to follow that chart and decide if it violates hate speech policies or not. They are given new cases as words take on new meaning, often dependent on context. So for example, if someone will tell you on Twitter, fish and chips to you too, I suggest you'd better look it up because there are apparently seven different explanations of that expression, even one including from New Zealand's Maori tradition, and that specific expression is a very offensive one. They are also given very strict instruction when offensive speech slides into hateful territory, and that's a real problem. Main challenges, I have already mentioned all of them. So what is being done to fight it? Social platforms are constantly updating their hate speech policy. For example, only last month, Twitter said that it will be adding a new policy addressing dehumanizing speech, where now it will include the entire group and add only specific classes. So a tweet, for example, saying that all women are scum and deserve to die would not violate Twitter rules before, but now it would be taken down. Also, Facebook said this month that it will add new anti-bullying tools, in order to improve for user safety, and also will allow other people to report on hate speech on behalf of other. Sorry, still here. So more human annotation. Facebook has said that it will have at least 20,000 people working on content moderation. By the end of this year, YouTube has already 10,000 people looking at content on the platform. Sophisticated technology. There is a new artificial intelligence tool launched by Twitter called Rosetta, and it has been designed to read text in memes, video frames, and images. Both Twitter and Facebook has turned to experts for guidance. Twitter will work with two groups of university researchers to help the company identify how to measure the health of conversation on the platform. And Zuckerberg has had, since the beginning of the year, a series of meetings with social media academics to discuss Facebook problems, especially content moderation. And in the EU has founded several hate speech projects. One of them is DAX, that has been awarded to Data Scouting and to the European Journalism Center. We together will try to work on a data-driven approach to countering hate speech against journalists and news outlets. And why journalists? Because they are a special target of hate speech. They are people of the public sphere, and they give voice to multiple opinions, even those to disadvantaged groups. So because of the relative prominence and high audience reach, journalists are often being harassed, intimidated, and threatened, not only for their work, but also for their gender, sexual orientation, or religion. So for example, Cecilia Vega, an ABC News reporter, was insulted by President Donald Trump during a White House press conference when he said that she never thinks. Even though White House came back and corrected that, saying that Trump actually said thinking instead of thinking, she was still verbally attacked on Twitter, with users suggesting that she gets back to her kitchen and starts making sandwiches. Also, the use of fake news, like Johanna said, is a very serious weapon to intimidate journalists. So, for example, in that tweet, a CNN reporter, Alison Cooper, was suggested that he is kneeling in order to fake the level of water and make the impact of Hurricane Florence worse than it actually was. But this picture was actually taken 10 years ago when he was covering a totally different hurricane, Hurricane Ike. So even though he explained that during his TV appearance, he was still verbally attacked, saying that he is a disgrace, or making anti-gay suggestions that he is on his knees most of the time. So these examples show that the role of journalists is being undermined. They are intimidated into silence, harassed, threatened, and humiliated. They face public defamation and personal attacks, and all of that has a very serious impact on them. Most of them suffer from fear, and that leads to self-censorship. They decrease their appearance on social media, and some of them even flee to another country for security and protection. They feel that they have to tone down controversial stories, they withhold information, or they abandon stories altogether. But from malicious threats like this one to actual intent. In June this year, a mass shooting occurred in the newsroom of the Capital Gazette, a newspaper in Annapolis, Maryland, US, when gunman Jared Ramos killed 5 journalists and left 2 more injured. So when hate speech is detected too late, the harm can be overwhelming, and we want to give back to the attacked. So within the DAX project, we want to map and model hate speech against journalists across social platforms in order to develop a deep learning-based hate speech detection models. We want to give them an early warning mechanism tool that will help them identify hate speech originators, to identify on-time hate speech concentric campaigns in order to take countermeasures, like, for example, to publicly expose the tactics and strategies of hate speakers, and also to be able to more easily notify platform operators about instances of hate speech. And in addition to the technology, we will be publishing playbooks and different frameworks so that journalists can address the problem from different angles. And finally, we do hope that the results of this project will be able to be used to protect other vulnerable groups. Ευχαριστώ. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you very much, and I would invite our panel to come forward. That was extremely powerful and sobering, and a bit depressing, actually. I did want to introduce Sandra Chastanet, who is joining our two previous speakers, Johanna and Sophia here. You may know, I hope you know, I think you know, Sandra Chastanet, who is the Director of Rights Holders and International Affairs at CFC, the IFRRO in France. She was appointed director in 2015, and prior to that has been with CFC since 2003. She's also a board member here at IFRRO and vice president of the PDLN, the Press Database and Licensing Network. And I can't think of anyone more appropriate to chair this fantastic panel. And isn't it nice to see a panel of all women? So please join me in welcoming this panel.
Thank you, Tracy. And thank you for both presentations. Yeah, Christian? So, do you hear me well? It's okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I will just open the panel to relate to an issue we talked a lot about last year, and which is absolutely related to the presentation today, which are fake news. There has been some developments since last year about fake news, at least at the European level. There has been a communication by the European Commission in April this year, which set different objectives to fight fake news. And it has been followed by a code of conduct adopted by the representative of platform and advertising companies on the 26th of September. And the European Commission said that democracy rests on free and independent media, and that platform and internet, of course, helped increase the quantity of fake news as well as hate speech, and they often lead to radical and extremist ideas which are spread on the internet. On the other hand, of course, there is the threat of censorship, which is a bad word also. So we have to find solution, and fake news and hate speech are absolutely facing the same issues. And we think that solution rests in the technical solution, as Sophia explained, as well as a legislative solution. Just on the first question, maybe for Sophia, on the technical solutions. So you think that we can have algorithm helping us to identify hate speech, and how Mark Zuckerberg said that he will have something efficient in something like 5 years. How do you think we can train algorithm and artificial intelligence to help us?
Well, I think that 5 to 10 years may seem like a long time to go. And I do believe in technology because I come from a technical company, a software company. But I do believe that these issues are extremely, extremely difficult, and a machine will never think like a person. So when you have an algorithm that you wanted to classify hate speech, first of all, that needs to know what hate speech is. And you need to feed it with examples of that. And those examples come from people. And we as people still are struggling with what hate speech exactly is. And when you have annotators, you will still have differences between them, no, this is offensive speech, no, this is hate speech, no, this is only sluggering. So this is extremely difficult, and we have to see algorithms as what they are. They do not solve the problems. They will not provide a hate speech definition, and they will not tell us that this is really hate speech. They will only bring instances of hate speech, and then based on that, we can act. And since we started doing the annotation at my company with the help of the European Journalism Center, there has been a very interesting study by actually a Finnish university in Aalto, I think, with cooperation with the Padua University in Italy. And they actually broke 7 classifiers of hate speech by simply inserting typos, like misspellings, or by simply connecting words. So when we as annotators think that hashtags are a very important things because we can track down trending issues of hate speech, for an algorithm, this is not the case. So for example, what they did was that they connected, they removed spaces, and they added words of love, like for example. So for a human person, I can read that. So yes, I will classify it as hate speech, but the algorithm will have problems identifying that. They also have problems identifying new instances because, as I already said, language is changing all the time. And for example, what we came across is that now, because some things can be detected and they are removed by artificial intelligence, haters come with innovative things. So for example, they would add a triple parenthesis under someone they want to attack. So a Jew under 3 parentheses is a very offensive thing. A machine will not track it down, but a human will. So we need really to combine these 2 forces, the human intellect and the machines, because the scale is so enormous that we cannot do it. So the combination, I think, will help us be there, but we constantly need to improve those things.
I would just like to ask Sophia about how are you thinking about language here? Are you working on English only? Because I'm very worried about small language areas, like you mentioned Myanmar, and Facebook being the internet there, and there's been horrible instances of ethnic violence in Myanmar and several other countries. And also we've found in Finland, which is a small language area, that when you report hate speech on Facebook and Twitter, it's not taken down because they do not have moderators who understand Finnish.
Yes, that is a really good point. And language diversity is and always will be, especially in countries like those. But the main problem with countries like Myanmar and the example of Facebook was that they actually worked with automated translation and not with human annotators. So the automated translation got everything totally wrong. And another issue is that those applications in those developing markets are only in English, where the majority of people do not speak English. So it is very difficult to be pushing buttons when I don't know what is underneath it. But as regards the DAX project, we are doing it only in 5 languages, which is English, Greek, Italian, German, and French. Spanish, sorry, not Italian, Spanish. And language will be a problem, and it's even for the tech platforms, because the only thing that they can get actually as far as good results is English. So language is a problem.
Thank you. Once we have identified the hate speech, I think what we need is a regulation to be able to remove or punish. There is 2 angles. The first one is, as you said, there is a lack in the legislation in most cases about the responsibility of the platform. It is not a copyright issue because hate speech are not copyrighted work. We know that in the current directive there is a question of responsibility of the platform towards protected works, which is not, which doesn't cover hate speech, of course. So do you think we would need another legislation, another directive, maybe the e-commerce directive that deals with responsibility of platforms, or what kind of instrument, legislative instrument, do you think we should have?
I think that as far as regulation is concerned, as far as you have laws that protect hate speech, especially in the US where most technical platforms come from, and especially they have a special Communication Decency Act, the section 230, where actually technical platforms are totally free to do whatever they want with the content that is published on their platforms. So as long as you have such regulations, you will not be able to control instances like that. And I'm not just talking about hate speech. There are so many other things, fake news, misinformation, disinformation, that are allowed because of such regulations. What I think we can do as a society, because regulation will stay there forever, there is money into it, and if you change that, they will lose revenues, and there are many people making money out of the social platforms. What we can do is really increase media literacy education, bring children or the younger population back to the era where news was really what was making the information newsworthy. And this is what we need to do as a society. Respect the job of journalists, respect the fact that they bring valuable information to us, and then maybe we can fight such instances.
There are definitely signs that the social media companies are kind of more willing to just even talk about regulation, because for years they would not even touch that topic, and they would definitely not ever admit to being publishers. They just, we're just a platform, we're not publishers. But quite recently, and especially this example of removing some content from removing accounts like Alex Jones and InfoWars, these are, editorial decisions that they make. And the more they make these kinds of decisions, the harder it becomes for them to justify the stance that they are not publishers. And when they become publishers, regulation will follow, I believe, at least in Europe.
Well, I think platform being publishers is a kind of a hot subject. So, because if they are publishers, they will have to respond to a lot of regulations, and they don't employ journalists, as you know. So, just before going to artificial intelligence, a last point on the hate speech, because if we want to, in the end, have action against the people who spread the hate speeches on the internet, we have to access their data. And is there in your project, for example, issues with GDPR?
Yes, there are issues with GDPR within the DAX project, especially in two sections. The first one, which is the most important actually, is the annotation, where in order for we got data set, like for example, we started with tweets, so we have, let's say, 40,000 tweets in a special data set specifically designed for the DAX project, where any personal data, including the account name, any mention of any other user within the tweet, the URL of the tweet, these all are encrypted so that annotators cannot actually get to the actual tweet of the person that made that statement. So that was something that we had to do. Then for the other parts of the DAX project, like for example the early warning mechanism, we will need to have direct access and opt-in from the journalists or from the users, so that they provide to us the data that we need in order for them to be able to use it. And then during the discussions that we have with different lawyers about the DAX project, one issue was if the early warning mechanism will be some kind of an automatic decisions, because it will notify a journalist that there is hate speech within his content in order for him to go back to that content and identify from whom that hate speech came from and take countermeasures, as I mentioned. So no, I can guarantee that the DAX project or the early warning mechanism will not make automated decisions based on what they are what they are writing, and so there are no legal procedures within that, because the DAX project will only provide instances of hate speech and not actually make any profiling of the users.
Joanna, do you want to?
I have nothing on that.
I have another question for you. Just to have a transition. What do you think the damage of hate speech on journalism would be?
It's pretty massive,
Yeah.
I would say. Last year, I published a book about online misogyny, so harassment of women online. It's in comics format, but completely journalism. So I've reported it, and then I've had an artist on it. And in that book, I've interviewed dozens of women who have been targeted with hate speech online, and actual hate campaigns. Sometimes bot armies have been deployed to attack these people, and not all of my interviewees were journalists, but quite a few of them were, and it definitely is an issue. Those people who I interviewed, they all say, we will not be silenced. This will not affect my work. I will still continue writing on the things that I'm writing about. But I see that people around them who are just observing what's happening to these people, they are the ones who really are affected, and they do start self-censoring. And I've heard so many people admit to this, that, I won't take that story, or I won't state my opinion on this issue on social media because I'm afraid of retribution. And this is definitely... the problem is that we are about to lose a lot of voices of women and minorities from society and from the public discussion.
Thank you. Talking about journalism and moving to your excellent presentation on artificial intelligence, I think it raises a lot of questions. The first one, as you describe now, artificial intelligence for journalists is more a tool to help them and to get rid of low-value work, which is good news until that. But we know, and we've seen this morning, that artificial intelligence is evolving, and it can be terrifying. And it can lead to more than that, and the autonomy of the robot can lead to write whole articles more than just data and fact. And do you think that it can be protected work, because there is a criteria of originality which belong to an author, and according to legislation which has to be a person, physical person? So what do you think the creativity and the nature of protection could be, or could evolve in this?
Of course, an algorithm cannot have creativity.
Yeah.
But there have been tests done where people are being shown articles written by machine and articles written by human, and most people cannot tell the difference, so they don't care. We as journalists, of course, do care, but so who does the copyright belong to when the machine is writing a news story? I think there might be two, maybe more possible answers to that. It could be that the programmer, the coder, might be the holder of the copyright, because they are the person who have built the algorithm and decided what data they are looking at, and what kind of templates they have for the story, what they're choosing the words and the phrases from. So maybe the coder might be the person, but then it might also be the publisher, because the publisher quite often, at least in Finland, owns the stories of journalists. So why doesn't the publisher then own the robot stories as well? I think they probably will.
Yes, Probably, and maybe it is a subject also for the publisher's neighboring right, where the publisher will be able, it's not a copyright, it's a neighboring right, so more commercial right, but where the publisher will be able to monetize this kind of content. So it can fall under this legislation at least. You were talking about platform being publishers, and we also know that platforms intend to create news and to compete with journalists and traditional publishers. But we also know that most of them won't really hire journalists. They will use robots or artificial intelligence and to dig into news and to create new news. So what do you see this competition going, and how do you see it evolving?
Well, it's quite a difficult problem, obviously, because journalists want to get paid, platforms want to have news but don't want to pay. But one example of this is actually the way Facebook is trying to combat fake news. What they're doing is they've collaborated with so-called third-party fact-checkers. So fact-checking organizations are actually, like, Facebook is flagging up possibly fake stories, and then fact-checking organizations who are official partners will then check the facts behind that, and then if it's a fake story, then Facebook will kind of flag that not as fake, but disputed content, I think is the phrase they use. And then they will show, if a person clicks on that link and wants to read that fake story, they will also be shown the fact check story about the same story. But this, of course, is very insufficient to fight fake news, because it takes a number of days normally, or if could even be weeks after the initial fake news story, that there is a fact check about it. So the fake news has traveled so far that you cannot catch it anymore, and the eyeballs that you get with the fact check, you're just not going to reach anywhere near the same audience. Facebook could, of course, try to feed this content to a lot more people. They do have the algorithms to do that, and they make other arbitrary choices. So why not make that choice? But they're not willing to do that. But this is another example of wanting the expertise of fact checkers and journalists, but not wanting to pay for it.
Yes, this is the issue with platform. Maybe there is question from the floor.
I have a microphone.
Yes, there is one at the back.
There's one right here.
I find it amazing that we are so careful about thinking about the liability of platforms. You said that they were publishers. Why should they be shielded from any responsibility under the e-commerce? Why? I mean, it's not just, there's the copyright thing, but the hate speech, the disinformation, the fake news, etc. This is, I would think, a debate we need to reopen. Maybe in the United States we can't do anything because of freedom of I don't know which amendment, but the amendment that says, okay, the First Amendment, sorry, I should remember that. But in Europe, we have the chance to look at it, because our democracy are at stake and are in danger because of that, because of the information circulating on the internet. So I don't think we should be shy, and I think we should definitely call on the next commission and the next parliament to look at the possibility for platform having a large outreach, maybe not for the very small platforms who have, but those who have millions of billions of users, well, they should make the extra effort, and maybe they'll have a little bit less profit, but as they don't pay taxes in Europe anyway, who cares? Sorry, it wasn't a question, but
no, but just to follow up, I think it is. we see that the European Commission and the Council take this into account, like fake news, hate speech, artificial intelligence, and they see that there is something missing in the current legislation. As always, we follow up the evolution of technology. And I think you're right. I think we have to ask the reopening of maybe the e-commerce directive to settle not only responsibility for copyrighted work, which is a current work, but a larger responsibility. So I think it's a very good point. There is.
Thank you. My name is Mogens Blikker Bjerregaard, President of the European Federation of Journalists. Thank you very much for two very comprehensive speeches. It's really important that that you are so vocal on this, and you continuously are vocal on it. There's one tool that you touched upon, but that I think is extremely important. The tool of our state leaders, our politicians, of the authorities, because they are creating these years such a hostile environment for journalists and media. I think this is one of the main problems that we are facing. That it is going to be legal to give more hate speech, to announce that something is false, as one of the big presidents is saying. And this also leads me to another topic, namely the way that we are, when we talk about fake news, I really want most of people to get away from the framing fake news, because it's a wrong way to talk about it. We are talking, call it what it is. It's about propaganda, it's about lies, it's about disinformation. And yes, there are some fake factories. But fake news, this word allows in some way political leaders to doubt on everything they don't like. And this is what happens about it. So we have to in Europe and in the EU, ask our political leaders to defend press freedom, full stop. Not something about, well, and then we ask you to do so and so. Please, full stop, after, defend press freedom. And create such an environment, because this is important for journalists not to be intimidated, not to be killed. It starts when political leaders say things like this. It starts when a government in Austria, for instance, one of the ministers asks his staff not to report to some of the newspapers because they are maybe too critical. It starts at these points. And this is one of the tools I would ask everybody to be very much aware of, and ask our political leaders to defend press freedom and defend journalism and media. But thank you very much, and please go on with your speeches other places.
I have to say I very much agree with you that the term fake news has been weaponized, and it's being used against journalists at the moment, and therefore, yeah, definitely we should maybe not use that term. It was created originally to describe something that imitates news but is not journalism and has a deceitful intent. And at that time, actually, when we first started using that term, there were a lot of fake news out there that were not, you wouldn't call them propaganda. They were just, they didn't have a political intent, but they did have an intent to deceive the reader. But it was just for making money.
And I just would like to add that in my presentation, I only spoke about hate speech in text, but it is enormous what is being done with video and placing, for example, political people in countries. I think that even some governments are being brought down by authoritative leaders that are using this kind of technology to put images on, let's say, animals or having sex on cars, and people are being jailed. And image technology is even worse than text. So I didn't touch that, but this is also very threatening.
Yeah, the so-called deepfakes video technology, which is, it will be, you know, at the use of everybody in the very near future. So you can actually make anybody say anything on video. There's also this audio technology where you only have to record a few minutes of somebody's speech, and then you can actually type in whatever you want that person to say in their own voice. And then this software also is, it's basically available now.
So I had the question, Sophia, on your talk, excellent talk, by the way, measures that we're taking right now against hate speech, and they seem to me, all of them, to tackle the symptom rather than the cause. In other words, across all cultures, across all geographic locations, across even history, there is a very strong correlation between love and knowledge and hate and ignorance. So trying to address, perhaps, are you aware of any initiatives that relate to informing people? I think you touched a little bit in one of the comments in the very beginning of your responses. You mentioned educating children and making sure people have access to information that is authoritative, that is genuine, that is truthful, that is checked, fact-checked. So I wanted to know if you can comment on that.
I think that I mentioned it in the presentation. There are several such awareness campaigns. One of them is No Hate Movement, which is by the European Council and encourages young people to tackle hate speech online and increase awareness against that. Also the Selma project, which is actually a system to, first of all, inform teachers how to approach hate speech, and then educate children about that, about the use at an early age for young people when they are using social media, Instagram, and how they can be protected. So they are first educating teachers that will be educating young people. Initiatives like the one Johanna is participating, all of these have this aim to educate people through different channels in order, especially about the impact. These are not political. We need also some kind of campaigns that will be used to create awareness about when hate speech is used for political reasons, which is a very dangerous thing.
If I can add to that, there are a lot of media literacy campaigns, and of course it's quite easy to reach teachers, and then you can reach young people through teachers. But how do you reach older people who are not in school? How do you reach the middle-aged men who send death threats to female journalists? There are a lot of those about, and it's very, very difficult. I think it's, media literacy is not the answer to everything, and therefore we need a whole array of responses to this problem. I think, this machine learning approach is one of them. We need all of these, and if somebody comes up with a good idea about how to get middle-aged and older people into some media literacy class, then please tell me.
I think we have a question in the back.
Yes, my name is Alicia Calzada, and I'm with the National Press Photographers Association in the United States. And as an organization that represents journalists, the environment is as you report, and it's very frightening. I think that what we don't need to revisit the First Amendment. What we need to revisit is Section 512, which is a law that created broad immunity for these tech companies in the name of innovation so that they could grow these now trillion-dollar companies almost. And they've created these enormous business models, and they've done so in part on the back of copyright holders, but also they've allowed this environment that you speak of to flourish. And I think that the irony is that the more influence they have and the more editing that they do and the more control that they assert, the greater their risk under 512 immunity. And so it's in their interest to just stand back and do nothing. And I'm oversimplifying the situation, but I think that's really where we need to take a look at whether these guys should really be allowed to continue to create this environment where they reap all the benefits and they're not responsible for any of the societal ills.
Hear, hear. Do we have any other questions? I think that just stunned everyone into silence. It was such a good interjection by you back there. And any other comments? I think this was just a fantastic and thought-provoking panel. And as a U.S. citizen, we are, we're in a terrible situation and moving backwards, and I think pulling a lot of the world back with us, unfortunately. And we're counting on a lot of the rights holders in this room and a lot of the governments represented here to help protect the, the decent state. Let me say it that way. So I want to thank you very much, and please join me in thanking the panel. A couple of things. I usually close the day by just reminding you about the purpose of the international conference, which has had a name change. It used to be called the Business Models Forum. Now it is called the International Conference. And these principles are those that were agreed by the board of IFRRO now many years ago, and we've been carrying on since that time. Caroline Morgan had to step out for a meeting, so I will quickly wrap this up with a few details. First, I would like to thank Verilia. She has done a fantastic job putting this thing together. Every year, Verilia and I throw this party together, and she is the backbone of what is happening here. I would also, again, like to thank our hosts, OSDEL, for their fantastic hospitality. And I would like to thank all of you. You've been a fantastic audience. I think the interaction today has been great, and boy, did we have quite a journey today, from the technology to the education and technology and the academic licensing, through to journalism and basically how essential it is to the world and democracy. I would like to remind everyone that you have 2 booklets that came in your blue bag from OSDEL and IFRRO. And those 2 booklets, I've been told, are very important for you to bring to the meeting tomorrow. They're bound booklets, and so please do bring those with you tomorrow. We will not have extra copies. If you are, I think I should also remind you that if you are responsible for the ballots for your organization, you want to bring those ballots along, because if you don't have the ballots, you cannot vote. If you forget your ballots, you don't get a replacement. So don't lose those or put them into the trash can. Bring the ballots with you. I also want to let you know that at 6:20 p.m., 6:20 p.m. tonight, let me see, what is that? Yeah, 1820, right? 1820. Want to check and make sure I'm right. Is the departure to the welcome cocktail. And there will be buses that you will need to get on to go to this welcome cocktail. So you want to be in the lobby of the hotel at 1820, 6:20 to depart for the welcome cocktail. I believe that are all of our announcements for today, and I thank you very much, and the coffee break is right outside the door. Thank you very much.
No, because they